Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. You're listening to The Tim Laskus Show. And yes, I'm Tim Laskus. And this is episode 24. And I am super pumped because today's featured guest is Gary Semics, the man, the legend in the sport of motocross. Gary has accomplished all sorts of stuff. Dating back to when he was 16 years old, he turned professional. The man was on a mission. By the time he was 18, he was already a factory-sponsored racer. He's ridden for several, I would say more than several, almost every factory team out there, including Husqvarna, Kawasaki, K&M, Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, everyone. He was a 500cc Supercross champion while he was riding a Husqvarna in 1974. That was a good year. I think I was like 3 years old. He's represented Team USA at the 1977 Motocross and Trophy Des Nations in France and Holland. And he also raced in 1982 the 500 World Championship Grand Prix. And when he was done racing, the factory team said, "We're not going to let you go. We're going to hire you to train our up-and-coming professionals." He's worked with such stars as Kevin Windham, Jeremy McGrath, and Ryan Villapoto, just to name a few. And today, he has an awesome video series on racing technique. He also has an international motocross training school, and he talks about what it takes to continue to be successful. So sit back, get in that comfy chair, and enjoy.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests. Entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Welcome. Today's featured guest is Gary Semics. Gary, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Hey, we were talking right before we started recording, and you said you're an exercise-holic. I don't even know if that's a correct term, but you're always exercising 24/7. You never stop. Is that true?
Well, not 24/7, but yeah, I guess I never really enjoyed exercise and physical training when I was younger, but I knew I had to do it because of racing if I wanted to get good results. So I did it. I did it anyway. And well, I'd say around the time I was about 20, I actually started enjoying it. And yeah, it just grew from there. I really still like it today.
So when you were young, so you had to be forced to exercise, probably like many of us.
Well, I forced myself to do it. I mean, I was active in school, up through junior high, played basketball, football, baseball during the summer, all the school sports, stick and ball sports. But then other than that, after that, I didn't do those anymore because I was so involved with motocross. And that's when I had to make myself go train and, run. And it's funny, I was riding Husqvarnas at the time, and in their owner's manual was Rolf Tiblin's former world champion training exercises. He had a whole thing in the back of the manual. And
Oh, wow.
I did those. It was a lot of hard type of calisthenics and running. And I started doing those. And, I was the kind of kid that if when I do something, I do it as hard as possible. So I was doing it way too hard to start off with. And that's probably why I hated it so much. It was so freaking hard.
So you overdid yourself. You were going to the extreme
Yeah.
of doing all those exercises.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's great. Well, Gary, you are a legend in the sport of motocross. You are a 500cc Supercross champion, and you've accomplished so much and ridden for so many different teams. Share a little bit about your background as a professional motocross racer.
Well, it started when I first discovered motocross, and you got to think, way back in the late 60s was just when a motocross was landing on American shores from Europe. We didn't even know what it was yet until then. And I was in the right place at the right time. I was 13 years old, and I was fortunate. The first race I ever saw when I first discovered what motocross was was one of the events that Edison Dye was bringing over European riders. And there was about, I'd say at least a dozen or more Czech riders on the CZs, Torsten Holm and Joël Robert, all the heavy hitters from Europe happened to be at this first race I ever saw. It was about an hour from my house. And I was 13 years old, and I was just running around those hills with my jaw hanging wide open in awe. And watching those guys on the bikes wheelie down the straightaways, slide around the corners, and it just blew my mind. I never saw anything like that. All I knew about was hill climbing. And that was it. I knew that day that that's what I was going to do. That's what I wanted to do somehow, some way.
Wow, so that's how the addiction started. It was like the European invasion. They came over here and they schooled us in motocross
Yes,
because we didn't know a
exactly.
thing about it, and we were, really the low country on the totem pole when it came to riding. Well, how many years did you race as a professional, Gary?
Well, I was 13 then. By the time I was 17, I was racing in the Trans Am series. That was the biggest event series in America at the time. It started in September through December. It was a 12 race series. It pitted the best Americans against the best Europeans and crisscrossed the United States. And that's when I started riding pro in that realm. That was when I was 17, and that would have been in 1971. And then I raced for factory teams and did the whole 9 yards racing for a living until 84. That was my pro career. But when I stopped racing just for a living like that, I would have kept doing it for a living if I could, but that financially, when I started losing my factory rides, and then it was the same thing that happens today. You go to the satellite teams, and then it just kind of starts to go downhill from there. So I made a commitment to myself. I wasn't going to lose money racing. So that's when I started doing motocross schools in 1985 and kept racing the local scene in California, Southern California at the time.
Right. So you were able to find a way to still stay connected to the sport and help others on the way out or on the way up the ladder. I mean, you had so much knowledge back then. And so, when it was time to retire as a professional, so to speak, before you got into business and selling your training programs, what was that like for you? Because your identity as a person is pretty much wrapped up into being a pro rider. And, when you have to retire, people get lost. What was it like for you?
Yeah, they say in any type of athletic career like that, a person has two deaths in their life. One is the end of their professional career, and then the other one is the real death.
Yeah.
So it was hard for me. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to do. That's all I ever thought about, ever wanted to do, and I didn't really know about doing anything else. So that's when I figured that, well, I'll get into acting. Acting will be a good thing to do. That sounds like a fun thing to do. So I started going to acting school. I lived in Southern California, started taking acting lessons. Long story short, I did that for about 2 years. I got I was on a couple like day shows on soap operas and stuff like that, but I landed a gig at Universal Studios on their live action show, one of their live action shows at Universal, and it was the A-Team live action show, and I was a stunt rider on a motorcycle.
Oh, cool.
There was two of us, and it was pretty cool. And I did that for a long time and made pretty good money at it, really, and just working. It was 4 days a week on, and then 3 days a week off, and then you were 3 days on and 4 days off, and it alternated like that. So it wasn't like 5 days a week all the time. And like I say, it was good money for the time I had to put in to do it, and I did that and still pursued acting. But then after a couple, probably 2.5 years, I realized, the big realization was you have to do acting for the love of acting. And I
Mm.
realized I didn't really love it like that. What I still loved was motocross. So I started racing the local scene in Southern California again, and I was already doing some motocross schools, but I got more serious into doing the motocross schools, and pretty much just went full time back into motocross, racing, training, and doing motocross schools. That's
Wow.
what I
So
love to do, and so that's what I was meant to do. It seemed like that's what
motorcycles
I
and
did.
motocross runs through your veins, so to speak, and it keeps pulling you right back in. You can never, once you enter that realm, you never quite shake it.
Yeah, Tim, that's just the thrill of twisting that throttle and being on those wheels, and it just when you do that and get in the zone, it blocks everything else out, and that's all that exists is you and the motorcycle and the track. And it's just there's nothing like it. I mean, people that haven't experienced that, they don't understand. They think kind of well, we're crazy, doing that stuff. A lot of people think that, but that I don't know. I guess it isn't for everybody, but for us
Yeah,
hardcore guys,
it's
it's great.
definitely it's an adrenaline rush, and it's a lifestyle, and you're absolutely correct. For people who haven't done it, looking on the outside, from the outside in, it seems like, wow, these people just have a death wish. They're out there jumping this crazy stuff, flying around, and they've got 20 bikes going into a turn that can only fit one or two, and
Yeah.
and it just seems insane to people. But when you really break it down and you get into the minds of those who race, there really is there's a lot more to it than that, and nobody wants to get hurt, and that's nobody has a death wish, or what. It really is. It's something that you become passionate about, that becomes who you are, and there's a lot of life lessons learned through the sport of motocross.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because it all depends on you and in your preparation and your confidence and knowing your limits and what you can do and what you can't do, and not taking unnecessary risk, but being on the line. You put it out there to the maximum without going over the edge, so to speak. And when everything works well and you get the flow, and I call it total flow concentration, when you get into that zone, is and then when you win a race, or at least ride your best and do very well, the satisfaction coming from that is indescribable.
Yeah, for sure. Now, everyone who's familiar with the sport of motocross and supercross knows stories of back in the 80s when Jeff Emig and Ron Lachine were out doing their thing off the track and getting into some trouble and having a little bit too much fun. Did that kind of stuff go on when you were racing?
Haha. It went on even more when I was racing. I mean, you got to remember in the when I really got into the sport, started racing pro, traveling to the races and everything, was 70, really 72, 73, 74, the early 70s. And the United States was in the hippie stage. The
Mm.
60s was the beginning of the hippie stage. And by the early 70s, we were really into the heart of the hippie stage. And that's where drugs and all those things and partying. Look at Woodstock. What happened at Woodstock? That was very prevalent. So the opportunities were there for drugs, but racers that were serious about racing knew that, well, you just can't do that. I mean, we raced two 40-minute motos plus 2 laps. So a lot of times you're out there for 45 minutes and you're trying to go as fast as you can the whole time. A lot of the races were in the heat in the south in July and August. It was brutal. So we had to train. We knew it, and then we couldn't get into drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. But we saw a lot of it going on. That's for sure.
Sure. Now, was there anybody that was just so talented that they could go and pop a beer right before their heat race and go out and just smoke everybody?
I never saw that. No, there wasn't anything like that going on. No.
It wasn't quite that wild.
No, not that wild. No, I hope people don't think that it was. I mean, the guys that were racing in the early mid 70s even, we were as serious as a heart attack when we
Uh-huh.
got on the starting line. It was that same feeling you get today. It's you're it's from the gate to the checkered flag, and you're going to the adrenaline. Of course, the bikes were dinosaurs compared to what they are today, but we didn't know any better. We thought that was the best thing available. And
Right,
it was
right.
the same type of feeling and commitment that you have when that gate drops.
Sure. Now, was there a particular race that stands out that you were in that's kind of funny or interesting that really you just kind of get a laugh when you think about it?
Not so much a particular race that I can think of, but a funny story.
Maybe where you're riding so fast, Gary, your pants
Oh,
came
that
down or
kind of
something?
thing. No, I never had that happen, but a funny story was that first Trans Am series that I went on. Was kind of like a farm boy from Ohio, didn't know too much socially. And I had a local CZ dealership sponsorship, and they sent me to Southern California on an airplane and my motorcycle. They flew us both out there for Carlsbad race. It was the first one of the series, and Jimmy Weiner picked me up at the airport because he was riding CZs at the time. And you talk about a contrast. Here's the shy, quiet farm boy with the flamboyant guitar playing, singing guy in the pits out of his van at the races. It was like oil and water, We didn't mix too well, but it was pretty funny. And he got me to the first race, and we had a good time. But the thing is, I had to go as a different identity because I was too young to get my license,
Oh,
my pro license, FIM and AMA. So I had a friend that got his pro license, and at the time you could just take the picture off and put your picture on it. And I went as Dale Burton,
oh,
not Gary Semics.
Gary Semics, aka Dale Burton. I love it. That's fun.
Yeah, fooled everybody. I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to get caught. I became friends with Brad Lackey, Jimmy Weiner, and a whole bunch of the other racers, and they all thought I was Dale Burton.
That's great. That is so funny. Well, that just shows your passion. You were ready to do it, get in there no matter what. Nothing was going to hold you back, not your age or anything else.
Yep, yep, I wanted to do it, and I wasn't accepting no for an answer.
Right. Well, that's what a champion is. They figure out a way to get it done. No excuses. Now, tell the listeners a little bit about your area of focus right now in business. What are you currently working on?
Well, I've been developing my motocross schools technique DVDs ever since I started, finding new ways to make it better, not only in my teaching methods and strategies, but helping other people that want to do motocross schools or already doing motocross schools to get better at it. I started certifying instructors 7 years ago. So they go through my study course and then test to pass the certification, and then they're teaching the same methods and strategies and techniques and format and everything that I teach, and I help promote them through my websites and social media, and that's been going out really good. I mean, most of them, there's 9 of them altogether, are doing really well, and very happy. They're making a living. A lot of them are just, that's all they're doing. They're just doing instruction and doing very, very well at it. So that's been really rewarding.
Now, this is internationally, right?
Yeah, actually, a lot of them international. There's 2 in the United States. I think there's 3 in Argentina, 2 in Chile, and 1 in Spain right now.
Wow.
Oh, and 1 in Germany.
That is
So
incredible. And
that's rewarding to help people do what I'm doing and to teach, because I've just made such a science of teaching these techniques to get them across to even people that are hard learners, I call them. It's difficult for them to learn stuff, but I've developed ways to breaking down the techniques into little separate learning blocks so you can learn each little aspect of a technique. I mean, some guys you can just tell them kind of the whole technique, whether it's the way you break into a corner, go from standing to sitting, control the brake, and then at the transition, go from braking to acceleration, your body movements. There's a lot of things going on to do something like that. Well, some riders that are further along and they can get close to doing that now, they can learn it pretty quick. But if you got riders that are more in the beginner stages and they just can't get the concept of doing all that through a corner, I've designed ways to break it down so they can do little separate parts of it,
Right.
starting, and working their way through the corner. And in a half hour or so, you can get them to do it correctly. And then once they feel how to do the whole thing correctly, it's just a matter of repetition to get it down into their subconscious and what I call automatic reflex reactions. So it's been working really
Yeah,
well.
that's where you want people to be when they're out there racing. Is it just comes automatic? There's no thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just a part of them, and I call it kind of muscle memory. But you've been doing these DVDs for such a long time, and you're able to be so successful in breaking down those techniques. And what gave you the idea to start these kind of international MX, training schools? Is it somewhat like a franchise that you started?
I mean, it's something like it with the certified instructors. Yeah, it's something like a franchise, but it's not really a franchise because they just pay an upfront fee to do everything they do to get certified, and then they don't have to pay me anymore. Where a franchise, you have to keep paying a percentage of your profits.
Right, right. Well, you're that good, Gary. Maybe you ought to start charging them a monthly fee on top of that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's that would probably be difficult.
But hey, that's a great way. And what kind of gave you the idea to do that? How did you start training trainers to go out and carry on your techniques?
It was just that desire to grow and expand, and I knew that, I couldn't be out there traveling all the time and reaching all these people in different parts of the country and let alone the world to do benefit from everything that I've learned in racing and technique wise. So I thought, well, what better way to do it than to train other people to do it? And that's kind of the same reason that I started my DVDs in the beginning. It was way back in '91. I had already been teaching for about 6 years because I realized I couldn't, reach all these people. So this way I could send them. In the beginning, it was VHS tapes. And that's when I started doing my technique DVDs. And now today I have 28 titles. They sell worldwide, and it's been awesome for us to do that and make money, but also to help so many people. We get feedback all the time how much it's helping people. So
Yeah, you're really giving back to the community and the sport and passing on your techniques and wisdom. And for some of the listeners out there who may have their own ideas of training, regardless of what it might be in, and maybe they're thinking of having their own DVD program, do you have any tips for entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about passing on their kind of techniques and advice and teaching people what they do?
yeah, I think first you have to find somebody to learn from. A friend of mine let me borrow his audio tapes from Anthony Robbins. This was back in, I think, '92 or something like that. And it was a 1 month training series on audio. And after each audio, you did one a day, audio tape, you had an assignment to do. And you did this assignment, and it kind of got you started. And that's what really turned me around. It made me realize what my priorities were and long-term goals. At the time I was looking at how am I going to have fun today? I was looking at daily things, weekly things, kind of wasn't looking at long-term goals. And Anthony's program really opened my eyes up to long-term goals and what do I need to do to reach those goals. And I was at the right time, I guess, that I really, really got into that. And that was a big part that turned me around and got my priorities set straight. But I would
Wow.
recommend that, is getting your long-term goals down and realizing what you want in 5 or 10 years, where you want to be, and then setting up a plan to where you work you use all your time and energy to take you toward those goals without getting sidetracked, and making sure that what you're pursuing is what you really like and you're passionate about doing it.
Yeah, it can't be all about the money. That's initially the money may interest you in the beginning, but it won't carry you to the finish line, so to speak.
I
That it
agree.
really has to be something that you're passionate in, something that's just part of you, and you get up every day and you would do it for free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's great. I think that's powerful stuff, is to be able to have that long-term vision. Where are you going? I think of it just like, when you jump into a car, typically you have an idea of where you're going many times, unless you're going on a Sunday drive around Columbia here. People just drive in circles, I think. But anyway, yeah, you need to know where you're going, and then you have that map of how you're going to get there. It's like if you're going to drive to Miami from Columbia, South Carolina, you're going to look at that map and figure out, okay, I'm going to Miami, and what are the different roads that I'm going to take? And
Hmm.
it's the same thing in life. And it sounds like that's what you needed to have that clarity for you to be able to take that next step in life and be a businessman.
Yeah, it really did set me straight and got me going on that. And then what I realized is you have to balance things out, because I think that was part of my physical fitness addiction. Is in motocross, I could spend all my time and energy riding, training, and racing. And it didn't, I felt great doing that. But when I got into business, and a lot of time was sitting at the desk doing mental work and preparation and thinking and stuff like that. And man, it just wasn't the same. It was I could get stressed out from that because I was missing the physical exhaustion, that I got from racing, to where I could really settle down and relax afterwards. And I had to learn to balance those two out, because I had at times I worked so much and so hard at that type of work that I became kind of depressed and anxious, wasn't sleeping well. It just wasn't fun anymore.
Well, it sounded like you hit a brick wall and you were going through burnout, which a lot of people who are entrepreneurs go through.
Exactly. Yeah, you could call it burnout. That was what it was. Yeah.
So what did you do to kind of turn it around? You said you felt depressed and just really kind of down and out. What was it that helped kind of pull you out of that and put you back on track?
Well, realizing what was happening, and then just taking some time off and going and having some fun, and getting away from it for a while, and having going out with some friends, just doing fun stuff, and getting away from the work. And then when, of course, you got to go back to it. But over time, learning that how to balance it out and have some leisure time and have some fun. I guess I have that mentality when I get into something. I'm hook, line, and sinker. I'm all in. And Cindy, my wife, has also helped me with that, because she's more likes leisure time and doing fun stuff. And she's helped me to balance that out. And that's probably why I like exercise so much still today, is it not only is it a really good feeling, makes me feel good doing it, and especially afterwards, but it also calms me down. I
Yeah,
mean, when you get pretty tired from exercising, you're pretty calm.
yeah, absolutely. And I would rather
I
be
have a
tired.
tendency to be, pardon me?
I would rather be tired physically than mentally. Mentally, it's hard to, it takes a while to bounce back.
Yeah, definitely. A lot different, a lot different. And for me, being a motocross racer and being so physical all the time, not only with racing, but training, yeah, it was a big adjustment. So, but it's all good now. I
Yeah,
think I got it pretty well figured
you
out.
have figured it out. So everyone listening, figure out what those long-term goals are, plan, and have balance. It's great stuff, Gary. And what
Yeah.
are the similarities between a professional athlete and an entrepreneur slash business owner?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarities. Being a professional athlete, you know what you have to do in order to keep improving and be successful, and you get on a routine, and you know it. You know when you mess up, if you miss doing something that you should have done, you kind of feel guilty about it, and you don't want to let that happen again. And it's the same way with any kind of business. I think you have to be disciplined to set your priorities and do your everyday goals. Get the stuff done that you need to be doing. Don't put it off. Don't be a procrastinator, but take action and get things done when they need to be done. Stay organized. People getting into their own business think, oh, this will be easy, this will be great, but it's harder than working for somebody, because when you work for somebody, you go there, you check in, and you do what you got to do, and then you're done. You don't even have to think about it anymore. But being your own business person, you have to be self-motivated, and there's 24/7 things to be done. It's more work, but the thing about it is you have to find something that you're passionate about. So it's not like work. You enjoy doing it. But then, like me, even then you have to realize there's still a balance to it, and you have to have some leisure time. You have to have some fun. So it's like in John Mellencamp's song, I know there's a balance because I can see it when I swing past. You have to recognize it and stay balanced.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I love listening to John Mellencamp, so that was great to tie that in there. And Gary, looking back, in time growing up, what kind of messages did you receive about, money and finances? And, did you ever have that talk with your any family members growing up? And you got into making money as a professional pretty early. Were you really good with managing money?
Well, I was good as far as I had a sense of not to squander money, not, my mom always taught me to save money, not to just spend it because you have it, to save it. So that was good. But I should have listened better to her, because she wanted me to invest with I was a smart business guy, broker, lawyer in Lisbon, where I grew up. And he advised her to tell me to invest in the cable business. Cable TV was just coming out. And I thought, I don't need to invest in that. I'm going to make enough money from racing. I don't need that. Well, that was a big mistake. So yeah, I should have invested in that, because it became a very lucrative, would have been an investment. But no, I really didn't, I guess, listen well enough when I was younger. I was one of those kids that thought he knew it all. I got this. I got it under control. And didn't really pay good enough attention to investing the money that I had. I mean, when I started racing for Kawasaki at 21, I was making a salary that a doctor would make. I mean, it was, in those days, it was really good money. And I was able to buy a 4-bedroom house in Huntington Beach, and I had roommates that rented from me that were friends. Actually, 2 of them were my cousins, and was making fantastic money. Like I said, I didn't waste it, I didn't squander it, but could have been a whole lot better if I would have just been more open and listening more to advice.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. Now as I'm in my mid 40s, and I have a young son, and I'm thinking back to some of the messages that my dad and mom had given me growing up, and I'm like, I don't need to listen to them. And then as you get older and more
Yeah,
wise, you're like, oh, I should have listened to them.
yeah,
But I think
yeah,
that's just part of
exactly.
growing up.
But just like kids today, you tell them that and tell them that and tell them that, and they just don't get it until they get older. And oh yeah, I should have done that.
Right. Sometimes they have to go through the school of hard knocks, and then they're like, oh, then the light bulb goes on. They're like,
Yeah.
oh man, I didn't need to step into that mess.
Uh, exactly. That's funny you say school of hard knocks. I use that one a lot.
Now, Gary, looking back at all of your accomplishments in racing and as a businessman, what's been the most fulfilling moment for you?
Well, I'll tell you, there was 2 of them. One at the start of my career. I mean, being this farm boy from Lisbon, by the way, hated farming, but had to do it because my dad needed my help. And I mean, there was work. It was like a man's work, starting at a very early age. And going from that to making a living as a professional motocross racer um, was a huge accomplishment, especially when nobody even knew what motocross was. And when I first told my parents that, they were like, oh, what are you talking about? You can't, nobody else was doing it yet. And, making that accomplishment. And then I guess at the end of my career, when I went to Europe to race the GPs, that's a long story. I got blogs on Vital MX about that. If you look up my name on Vital MX, you can find my blogs. And I wrote probably a dozen articles about my European experiences over there. But yeah, I went over in '82 to ride 500 GPs as a privateer, getting some support from the distributor in Germany. He was supposed to give me bikes and parts. When I got there, they were like, what? We don't even know you. We don't know anything about that.
Wow.
So they ended up doing it, but it was a while before they knew what they were going to do. But anyway, I went from that to a few races into the Grand Prix series. I went over real early in spring to do the preseason international races. Went through all that, and then we got into the GPs, and after a few races I was doing well, and Honda of Japan gave me a works bike and supported me through the rest of the series, and ended up 7th that year in the GP series. And that was a huge accomplishment, coming from the way I did, getting over there, not having anything, and then working up to getting 7th overall was really rewarding. So those are two big ones.
That's excellent. Wow, that's wonderful. And that must have been just incredible from where you grew up and being a farm boy and then going and having that exposure and being in those situations. That is great.
Yeah, I'm very blessed to have all that and go through that. I still I'm grateful for it today, and then especially with after getting out of racing for a living and then being able to stay in the sport and help other riders and even instructors now do the same thing. It's been fantastic. Very blessed.
Well, Gary, the sport is definitely very appreciative of everything you've done. I mean, it wouldn't be where it is today without you. And
Thank you.
and I mean, Gary Semics, you are motocross and you're a legend in the sport, and you've just done so much. And so it's wonderful to have you on the show today and
Thank you.
talk to you and have you share your stories. And it's going to be time to wrap it up. But before we leave, Gary, I want you to tell the audience where they can find you online, your website, your DVDs, your training program, all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, my website is very extensive. You can go to GarySemics.com to find it. And I'm also pretty active on Facebook, getting into Instagram and Twitter a little bit now too. But yeah, go to my website mainly, or Facebook, and you can message me from there, and everything pretty much there. You can find, even have online training now, where it's not just where you can access information if you're an online member. It's a very personal online coaching programs that I have set up. You can find out all about it on my website, GarySemics.com.
GarySemics.com. Everyone be sure to visit and check Gary out. And I learned something, that Gary Semics is also known as Dale Burton, everybody.
Alias Dale Burton.
There you go. I love it. Gary, thank you so much for your time. You've been a fantastic guest, and man, I could talk to you all day long.
Hey, we'll have to get together and talk some more sometime.
Absolutely.
Tim, I'm very appreciative of you having me on the show today.
Thank you, Gary. Take care.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlaskus.com.